Hello everyone, and welcome to another Gathering Moss YouTube channel video extravaganza! What? It's just a terrarium setup video? Cut! Cut! Why am I always the last one to know these things? Now that we have that all figured out, welcome everyone to the Gathering Moss YouTube channel. My name is Phil, and welcome to our home. My wife Crystal and I would like to thank you for joining us today. And it's going to be just a little bit different video today. We are going to set up a terrarium. On our websites, on our shops, we sell a terrarium kit. And this is not only being sold by us, but by retailers nationwide. And so we wanted to get a video out with some instructions on how to set one up if you aren't aware of how to set one up. So what we're working with is a jar that looks kind of like this one. They're not exact. The ones that we actually sell are a little bit taller, but it for the most part looks exactly like this. It's a glass jar with this unique cork ball lid. It just kind of sits on the top and helps hold the humidity in. They're meant for coffee, I believe. Just a nice, fancy, decorative container to put coffee in. But we have repurposed it for what it should be used for. Duh. It's for plants. It's like the cup holder in the car. I've heard it a million times by plant people. It's not a cup holder, it's a plant holder that sometimes we put our coffee in. This is a coffee container that we put plants in. It's really a plant container. It's a terrarium. But anyways, so we sell this, we sell the jar, we sell the substrates that you'll need to set up your terrarium, and then put your plants that you picked out by yourself inside. We don't provide the plants, we just provide the essentials to set up your terrarium so it's ready to go for the plants that you choose. In this one, I have a couple of different things. I have a few nepenthes, which are bug eaters, carnivorous plants, and a couple of nepenthes. You probably know them better as pitcher plants, also carnivorous. And I have a little bit of, I think it's called reindeer moss, something like that. I picked it up at one of our local greenhouses, just as decoration. And then I have an orchid inside. I believe it's a Restrepia orchid. Nice little Central America orchid, I believe, with a really interesting and unique flower, which it's just about to flower, which will make it, besides a couple of the cheap grocery store orchids that I have around the house, it'll be the first one I get to bloom, which is really pretty interesting and neat. So what we're going to do today is we're going to unbox the terrariums that we sell. We're going to insert the substrates that you'll need to set up your layers to make it a good environment for your plants to live in. And we're going to set it all up and get it ready. And so you have some instruction on how to set yours up when you actually purchase it. So let's get started. Okay, well, I've set us up a little bit here with the camera so that we can see what we're working with. I wish I was more like my favorite YouTuber, Miro, Basie Plants, and was a lot better at doing this kind of thing, but you get the basic idea. So this is what we have to work with. This is what will come to you if you have it shipped to you, or if you purchase it in a retail store. They may take it out of the box, I'm not sure. But how we ship it is just like this. Figure out how to do this. But it has our little sticker right on the front. Just terrarium kit, and then on the sides it has some basic information about what's inside and some really basic instructions. So that's what the box looks like. And then let's go ahead and unbox it. So I found these jars on the internet, and I just I fell in love with them, so that's where this all kind of comes from. I I'd gotten the bug for terrariums through one of our local experts, and so this kind of all came together really quickly, and I just decided that this would be a perfect container for decorative display in the home. So what is inside the box is, once again, we have our cork ball lid. We have our glass container, and you can tell, like I said, that this one is, well, really quite a bit bigger than the one I actually showed you before. It's a lot taller. They're close to the same dimensions as far as width, but quite a bit taller, which makes it nice for a taller plant. So then inside we have the substrates that I use for terrariums. Now, if you get this and there's something else you've learned in your searches of terrarium setups that you want to add, go for it. But what we provide are 4 different ingredients that I was taught to use in a terrarium setup. So kind of going from the top down, we have a bag of the Gathering Moss fill dirt, very simple setup with tree fern fiber, perlite, pumice, orchid bark, and just a little bit of fluval stratum. So that's what we have in this bag. Then we have a bag of biochar, which is a really good filtration media, and also helps with any odors that might come with having a terrarium. Usually not, but just in case. But it's really a good filtration media. Use it in fish tanks quite a bit. So that's in here. And then we have our sphagnum moss. Nice generous portion of sphagnum moss that we will be using as part of our setup. And then the bottom layer that I've learned is leca balls. Just a nice thing to help hold the moisture down at the bottom. And these are going to be a little bit tricky to get out. Let's see what we can do here. Hopefully you won't have these issues, but if you just work it, it comes out. Just might take a little bit, but don't force it out, because then you'll break your terrarium, and we really don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on setting this up and take it layer by layer. What we've included in here is an extra generous portion that you don't have to use all of. So if you see these leca balls, there's quite a bit of them in here, and if you kind of get the idea, you'd have leca balls halfway up the container. And you really don't want that, because you want to keep the, let's call it the earth layers, down to a minimum so that you can get a taller plant in there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our leca, and the first thing I do with any leca is I take it to the sink and I rinse it. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and I will be right back. Okay, so we're back, and I have thoroughly rinsed our leca balls. They tend to be very, very dusty after being in a bag and being shipped from wherever you receive them from. I bought these off of Amazon. I'm guessing that's where most people will get them from. But they tend to be really dusty, and they're clay. LECA stands for lightweight expanded clay aggregate, and they're just clay balls that are very good at holding moisture. So they're used a lot in semi-hydro setups. If you watch YouTube, you've probably seen the LECA Queen. She grows most of her houseplants, maybe all of her houseplants, in LECA balls. They're very good for that purpose, and they tend to hold moisture, but they don't hold a ton of moisture. So they keep the airflow around the plants in good shape, as well as providing moisture to those roots. So a very good media in which to grow in. Alocasias love them. almost any houseplant would love this setup. I don't personally use it a lot, but I do use it on some of my alocasias. Just I just started it as an experiment, and they've grown so well that I've just left them in there. So once again, we've rinsed them thoroughly, get all the dust and debris off of them, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to insert those into our terrarium as the bottom layer. Now, what you want is a layer that water can sit in and slowly work its way up through your other layers, but you don't want a huge layer so that your room isn't taken up with just your earth layers. So you kind of have to judge, and don't think you have to use everything that comes in our terrarium kit, or you have to use the whole portion that we've supplied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to judge. I'm going to put some of these in here, and I'm going to try to judge exactly how big of a layer I want. And let's just dump some of these in here. It's going to be loud. So I've put about half, maybe a little bit more of what was provided. As you can tell with getting these beat kind of in, it's a good layer. It's maybe 3 or 4 layers deep of the leca balls. Not huge, maybe a little bit too much, but I'm going to leave it like that. It's not too bad. Your other layers are going to sit right on top of this, so you're going to end up with it up high, but you just don't want to go too high, because you want plenty of room for plants to expand, because you don't want to plant a plant in here and within a couple months you're replacing it because it's just outgrown the container. So we have our leca balls in here as the bottom layer. Some people at this point would go ahead and put their water in, or their water solution, but I tend to wait until it's all done and then just let it all drain down through the layers as they're set up. So we have our leca balls in there. That's our bottom layer, our bedrock, if we're talking about earth. And then we want to put in sphagnum moss, which is going to be kind of a filter for things flowing down in there, so that they don't get down into our water levels, so that can kind of stay free and clear to hold the water. At least that's how I take it. There may be different reasons for it, but this is what I tend to think of as a filter. So we have our sphagnum moss. It comes to you dry in one of these baggies, and so you want to moisten it. And once again, you're not going to use the whole thing, because you only want a small layer of the sphagnum moss. You don't need it to be huge. So just, you'll want to open your container, and I have a bowl with some distilled water here. You don't want to get it too moist, and I probably have too much water in there, but that's okay. We can squeeze the water out as we go. But I'm going to put about half of the baggie in there, and we'll see how well that does. So we're going to put that in here and let it soak up some of the water. I'm kind of used to working with moss with our grow trunks. It's become second nature with moss. Yeah, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but we love it, and we love our grow trunks, and they're our bread and butter. So we use them every day. We use them on our plants, and we use them in our home. You can't see much in here right now, but I'm going to do a plant tour one of these days, and I'll show you around and show you some of ours on grow trunks. But so we have our moss, and it's good and moist. It's not overly moist, but it's nice and wet. So we're going to stick that down in there. And what I tend to do at this point, because you don't want to leave it just like this, you want to get it into a set level or layer. I take a screwdriver, and I have some screwdrivers here at home that the end of it is rounded, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to reach down and kind of flatten this layer out. So I tend to move the moss around as much as I can, and I just kind of push it down and get it set in place. And I can tell looking at this, I need a little bit more moss. So we're definitely gonna wet a little bit more. Not too much more, but a little bit more. So get a little bit more of this moss out here. Sphagnum moss is another media that really holds moisture. That's why we use them in grow trunks or any kind of moss pole, just because it's a way of holding moisture in. It releases moisture over time. It's not a long-term hold, but you know, you get 3 or 4 days of time with moisture up against roots if you're using a grow trunk. Maybe a little bit more. It just depends on your setup and how your plants are growing and the time of year. During the summer they tend to last just a little bit longer because the humidity is a little higher than it is in winter. But it's just a good way of holding that moisture inside a little bit longer inside a moss pole and giving your plants that ability to get their nutrition through that means. So we've wet a little bit more, and I'm going to just take a part of it and stick it down in there. And once again, use my screwdriver to kind of work that moss down as low as I can get it to make a nice layer of moss. Once again, I take it as a filtration layer. So you've got your leca on the bottom, holding your water that will actually feed your plants and keep your plants moistened, and the terrarium humidified. And then you've got this layer of filtration with your sphagnum moss. And sphagnum moss gets everywhere, so it tends to be a little bit grainy. But it's a pretty good layer. Over here I'm a little thin, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more. And you'll get the hang of this as the more you do these terrariums, but I just like to see a nice even layer. Maybe a 1/4 inch thick or less. You don't need it to be huge. Once again, it's just as a kind of a filter, and once again, it's going to hold some moisture too. So all the water isn't sitting right against your soil. There's a layer there it's like you have a ton of moisture down at the bottom, and it's going to soak up into the moss slowly. So there's a little bit less water there, and then in your actual soil, you get a nice balanced amount of water in there, so that your plants are getting the nutrition and the water that they need, but they're not being overwhelmed by the water that is sitting down here. So it's not it's kind of a nice setup in that how it feeds the water up. And then once again, it's going to build up humidity with the closed lid, and you're kind of in a self-feeding system, so the water's working its way up, and then with the humidity, it's kind of flowing it back down. So it's kind of a nice setup, and it keeps water in there for quite a bit of time. If you have a nice sealed lid, it can be in there for, I don't know, I'm guessing for years, maybe a year, before you'd have to put more water in there. But anyway, so we've got a nice even layer now of the sphagnum moss. Hope you can see that. I'm not really good at where I need to have these cameras yet. But there you have a nice layer. So then we've got our moss in there. So then the next layer, you've got your leca, now you've got your sphagnum moss, and now you want to put in your biochar, kind of your filter cleanliness or filtration media that's actually going to work with what's in the terrarium to keep things nice and clean. It helps with any odors that may be in there. It helps block out any kind of fungal issues that you may have in there. There's just a lot of good things with biochar, and that's what we have in this bag. And we give you a really generous portion. You're not going to need anywhere near all of this. So just use it lightly. Um, and when I say lightly, I'm not saying don't put any in. I'm just saying you don't need to put the whole baggie in there. So I just get it down in there. What I try to do is I try to sprinkle it so that we're covering that whole layer of sphagnum moss. So I just kind of work my container around in my hand just to completely cover it. Okay. So there we have a nice, I don't know if you can see, hopefully you can, a nice even layer of the charcoal, the biochar, completely covering that layer of sphagnum moss. Okay, so we've got that in there. I tend to do my little stamp or pound down again, just kind of press it in. Once again, I want to keep this as low as I can so that I can put a taller plant inside here. So I just want to tamp it down just a little. I don't want to break up the biochar any more than I have to, so I just lightly do that. But then I've got a pretty even setup here, if you can see, with my leca, my sphagnum moss, and now my biochar. So we are ready to put in our final layer, which is a layer of fill dirt. So we've got that right here. Once again, another baggie, a very generous portion. Hopefully we've given you enough. And this, I'm just gonna once again eyeball and see how much we actually need, because we don't want to do a ton, but we want a good generous soil layer. So there, we're doing our Earth's crust layer now. Okay, so let's see what that does. Once again, I'm going to use my handy dandy screwdriver here and kind of just move things around. Move that fill dirt around and make a nice even layer. At this point, if you wanted to, you could get a little fancy and make it kind of a hillside kind of setup. Anything like that if you wanted to, but I tend to just make it nice and level and even. And we're looking at a good maybe ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch of soil there. I'm going to go ahead and just use, I think I'm going to use for the most part the rest of the bag. Just to have a nice generous layer so that if there's any roots with the plants that I actually put in here, they'll have room to get down in that soil. So let's go ahead and spread that out. Tamp it down once again so it's nice and level. Okay. So there it is. So we have, once again, we have our leca balls at the bottom. If I get in the middle of the camera, that would help. We have our leca balls at the bottom. We have our layer of sphagnum moss here, our filtration level, and then our biochar. And last but not least, the important stuff, the fill dirt, the soil level. So this is all set up and ready for a plant. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some water and really get it set up for those plants to be installed. Okay, so I have some distilled water here, and it's not going to take too much. What I tend to try to do is put enough water in here to cover my leca balls, not get up into the actual sphagnum moss, just a really good generous portion of water just at the bottom of the container. Once again, the leca balls are going to hold moisture. They're going to pass that moisture up to the sphagnum moss, and then that sphagnum moss is going to work that moisture up into your soil so that you have a nice, evenly moist and also airy soil for which your plants can grow in. So you don't want to overwhelm them with water, so this is a really nice setup for kind of a leaching environment where that water can go up from the bottom all the way up into your soil and then work its way back down through humidity and the natural event of things, how the earth works with water, and then it's just going to work its way back down and start over again. So we have our water here. I was going to use distilled water, but what I usually do is I use a different kind of water. I use our nutrient solution. In this case, it's my orchid juice. It's an orchid fertilizer, and just with rainwater, because I use rainwater with everything. I collect it all the time. I'm kind of a nut with rainwater, so if you ever drive by our house, you may see me standing out on the front porch filling jugs. But anyways, so I use an orchid fertilizer with the rainwater, and that's what I would put in here because I want to feed our plant that we're going to put in here. So that's what we're going to do. And what I tend to do is I try to get it so that it runs down the side of the container and not disturb the work that I just did. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell or not, but if you look in there, you can see the level of the water. I don't have it completely filled up to where it's hitting the moss, but it's just a nice generous layer at the bottom of the container so that the leca balls can do what they do best, which is pass that moisture up into the sphagnum moss, and then that sphagnum moss can pass it on up into the filter. So now, if I had a plant, which I don't, we could install our plant and we would be ready to go. But this is completely set up. We have our layers in there. Once again, we started with the leca. We got a nice even layer of leca, not too high, not too low, just for plenty of room for our water to sit. Then we put in our sphagnum moss, kind of our filtration level, and another layer for passing water slowly up into the filter. We have our biochar layer, kind of our filtration, where we keep down any kind of issues with our water or our soil passing between each other. And then we have our layer of filter, the earth layer. So it's kind of almost like you've taken a piece of the earth and put it inside a terrarium, your little jar, and then you're going to grow your plant on it. So at this point, we would install the plants, we would put the lid on it, and let it do its thing. Now, I recommend finding a place where it's going to get a good, generous portion of light. I tend to either put them in an east or a west facing window where they're not going to be overwhelmed all day long with sunlight or direct sunlight. The east and west, they're going to get more indirect sunlight, but they need some kind of sunlight. If you don't have that, a grow light is a good thing, even if they're decently close to a grow light. And also some heat is always a good thing. If you can keep them in a warmer area, not with a really chilled environment, that's a good thing for the terrariums also. So that's kind of what we do with ours. And if you want to, leave some comments leave some information in the comments below on how you set up your terrariums, things you may do differently with terrariums, the different kinds of media that you may use in a terrarium. I've seen them with pond used in terrariums as the bottom layer. I know that some people put biochar in there in different areas. So if you have different ways of doing it, leave a comment below and let us know how you do it. It's always good instruction. I'm always learning. This was a learning experience for me. So just let us know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, if you give us a thumbs up, that would be great. We would love to know that you like this kind of content. If not, leave a comment and let us know that too. So we appreciate you taking the time to view today. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We'll be glad to help you with setting up your new terrarium. And have a great day, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.